She stole my wood. Not metaphorically, literally. Logs off my porch in broad daylight. Like she thought she owned the air in front of my house. I'm Eli Mercer. I live on the edge of Cedar Hollow. And for 30 years I stacked my winters the same way, neat. Counted. A small private order that meant warmth for my wife's chair and quiet evenings by the stove, nothing flashy. Nothing to justify somebody treating it like public property. Cedar Hollow looks like one of those postcards where everyone pretends life is simple. Same mailboxes. Same trimmed hedges. Same HOA newsletter that arrives with 3 rules and 2 complaints. Lila Prescott moved in a few years back with her perfect boots and quicker opinions. And before anyone really noticed, she'd convinced half the block she knew what the neighborhood needed: new paint rules. Invisible fines. And a way of standing over people like a judge with a clipboard. She appointed herself the kind of ruler who could notice a crooked scarecrow and make it someone else's problem. The first time she wrote me up, I assumed it was a neighbor misunderstanding. Eli. That woodpile. She said at my front gate, measuring air with her eyes. It's unsightly and within setback. I told her it was private property. That my wife used it for tea nights. That I stacked it off the path. She smiled. Like a blade wrapped in linen. And left a notice anyway. The notice felt small. But it landed with the weight of a hand on my shoulder, a reminder I wasn't allowed to be careless about other people's ideas of neatness. Then logs started vanishing. At first 1. Then 2. Then a whole stack gone by morning. I thought raccoons. I thought the wind. I thought any of the easy explanations that let you sleep at night. But raccoons don't load wood into a tidy little pile by the HOA shed, and they don't leave a trail of mulch on the tires of a sedan. I set up a porch light. Then a motion camera, not because I wanted to trap someone, per se, but because I wanted to know who was borrowing things from the rituals of my life. The footage, grainy, still sharp enough to show Lila in her coat. Gloved. Moving like she owned other people's things. She lifted logs like it was duty. Carried them past the azaleas. Loaded them into her trunk. I watched her do it 3 nights in a row until the film felt like proof, and shame wrapped together, proof against denial. Shame against a neighbor I used to wave to. When I showed the footage at the next board meeting, I saw the room shift. People sat straighter. Ruth Haynes, who balanced the books and half the town's gossip, actually looked uncomfortable. Lila, for her part, smiled that thin smile and called it misunderstanding. I thought I was consolidating Hazardwood, she said, like she'd done me a favor. She labeled my property hazardous after an explanation that only made sense if you started with the premise she was the only one authorized to decide the shape of danger. I could have gone to court. I could have demanded restitution. I could have taken the quiet, bureaucratic route, and maybe that would have been the moral high road. Instead, there was a small voice inside me. Part engineer. Part old husband who remembered what it was to build a life with someone who's gone. That said, sometimes you respond with facts. And sometimes you respond with theater. I won't tell you how I did it, the exact steps. The materials. The recipes of mischief, because there's a line between a story and an instruction manual. And I have no interest in sending anyone to the hospital or the county jail. What I will tell you is this: I crafted a response that was theatrical, wholly non-harmful, and tailored to embarrass without endangering. The logs would pop and smoke, dramatic. Startling. The kind of thing that makes a person forget their script and show a real face. Think of it as a stage trick. A puff of consequence. The night Lila came for the last stack, she moved the same as before, confident. Efficient. Humming a little like someone on a mission. She slipped the logs into her car. Drove them home. And later, in my version of timing, she lit them in her fancy hearth while friends were over. While neighbors praised her community spirit. The noise was sudden. The smoke immediate. Guests shrieking. Lila's perfect composure cracking like varnish. She ran outside coughing. Her neighbors staring, not with the small, obedient approval she'd trained them for, but with something harsher, surprise. And a measure of pity. At the emergency HOA meeting the next day, she tried to blame defective logs. Bad suppliers. Some cosmic accident. Her board members shuffled papers. The same folks who'd once nodded at her ideas looked like they'd swallowed a bitter thing. I played the footage again. This time with sound. I told the room what I intended not to harm, but to expose. I told them why I built the trick, not because I liked conflict, but because I wanted the community to see what unchecked power looks like from the receiving end. There were arguments. Lila called me reckless. Dangerous words that hung in the air like a challenge. I told her she'd been stealing instead of leading. That governance without humility turns into petty theft disguised as order. Somebody suggested mediation. Somebody else suggested she step down. There was a vote, not a lynch, but a formal, honest undoing of the authority she'd grabbed. After that, life in Cedar Hollow didn't become flawless. People still argued about paint colors and whether the new mailboxes were tasteful. But there was a new undercurrent, a reluctance to let one voice become the law. Ruth reorganized the board to include more neighbors. The fines became clearer. The appeals process real instead of a rubber stamp. Lila moved away 6 months later, packing a lot more than a trunk, a bundle of remarks. A lifetime of being right when nobody asked. The part one keep returning to. The part one think about on slow afternoons when the kettle whistles and the wood crackles just so, is smaller than any board meeting. It's the way the Parkers, who'd been quiet while Lila ran around like she owned the neighborhood's conscience, came by with a pie and said, "We're sorry we didn't call you sooner." It's the way Deputy Cole, who'd always been kind but distant, came down to my porch and said, "You did what you felt you had to do." That's where the story lives, in the apologies we learn to say after we see what silence permits. I've been asked if I regret it. There's a flash of unease when I think about the moment it all became public, the part where humiliation became a weapon. But regret would mean I valued easy civility over honesty. And I don't. Sometimes justice wears an awkward face. Sometimes it smells faintly of burned wood. And sometimes people learn faster from spectacle than from rules. I'll live with the memory of Lila's stunned face because it taught others to look at the person on the other side of a complaint. So who's right here? Who's wrong? That's what I want to know from you. Was I a vigilante with too much pride? Or a neighbor who'd run out of options? Did Lila deserve the kind of reveal she got? Or should she have been given the chance to change without a public performance? I want to hear your take, the things you'd do differently. The moments you recognized in your own street fights. The times you watched an order become a little too hungry for obedience. If you like this, if it stirred something, hit like and share it with someone who lives in a place where rules are stronger than kindness. Drop your story in the comments. Have you ever had to stand up to a neighbor who turned power into a habit? Say which side you're on. And why? I'll read through the replies, and maybe if enough of you have similar stories, we'll pull together what happens when communities choose to be kinder than they are comfortable.